All right, there we go. Excellent. All right, hey guys. All right, so study group. So we are working. We're working through A Course in Miracles, and I am reading the annotated version. We're studying the annotated version just because it has all of Helen Schumann, the author of the book. It has all of her original notes, and so I think that's important that we have that because it helps us to understand like what was going on in her brain, and it also helps me to understand where some of the writing is based in. Just because we may hear something or read something and think one thing, but then when we actually go through the material and see the notes that the person wrote down around it, it helps us to... Okay, so the last time we were reading this, we were on page... Yeah, we were like on chapter... We're still in chapter 1 because it's taken us that long to get to the material. But the last time we left off, we were on principle number 48. It's a very long principle. So I'm just going to kind of like zoom through it because I kind of want to get started with the other part of it to the next principle. There's 2 more principles before we actually start the next chapter. So I'm going to read where I left off, and then I'll stop and kind of comment and give you some of what is going on here. On number 48, page 49 of A Course in Miracles, the annotated version, not the original version, the one that they put together afterwards. So I'm on number 18. Remember that you who want peace can find it only by complete forgiveness. You never really wanted peace before, so there was no point in knowing how to get it. This is an example of the need to know principle, which was established by the Plan of Atonement long before the CIA. No kind of knowledge is acquired by anyone unless he wants it or believes in some way he needs it. So he wants it or believes in some way he needs it. So what this is saying, this is basically bouncing off of the idea of seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be answered to you. So knock and it shall be offered to you. So that's what this is talking about right here. And so when she is acknowledging, because she's having this conversation, right? She's channeling, excuse me. She's channeling, Jesus in this because she believes that she's speaking or she's channeling the being of Jesus. And so that's what this entire series is about. But what she is acknowledging is that in order for you to receive or in order for you to gain, you have to come from a place of desiring or wanting. And so it's only when you believe that you want it or believe that you need it, not just wanting something, will it start to show up for you. It has to come from a much deeper place, which is very true because I went through this process myself when I was trying to find answers to the mysteries of the universe or to God or to our existence here on this planet. I really desired to know and understand. And because I was coming from a place of authentic connection with the information, it started to show itself to me in different ways. Now, whenever this happens, you can either accept what you're given or you can push it away and then you can just ignore it and then, and it is what it is. But I now wholeheartedly, whenever something is offered to me, I accept it, whether it's like accurate or very helpful or not, doesn't matter. I still accept whatever lessons I'm given, whatever lessons life offers to me, because I believe they're all from God. They're all from Source, helping me to understand many of the things that I struggle with or many of the questions that I have. Because when we're going through our day, we're having encounters or we're experiencing things, we actually have a process of asking questions. And when we send out a question, which I send out questions all the time, the answer usually materializes for me in bits and pieces coming from Aja. And so before, though, it would just come in bits and pieces over time and it wouldn't happen right away. So it took some time for me to get used to doing that. The next one is the following section will be the only one which deals with the concept of lack, because while the concept does not exist in what God creates, it is very apparent in what you make. It is, in fact, the essential difference. In other words, when we decided to come to this place, this matrix, this human matrix, life matrix, we came in with the illusion that there was lack. because the only way this place exists is being supported by the illusion of lack. But it's just an illusion. It doesn't actually exist. We've chosen for it to exist for the purpose of coming here and experiencing what we need to experience in our lives. So that's what they're talking about here. So when they're talking about the following section will be the only one which deals with the concept of lack, because, well, the concept does not exist in what God creates. There is no actual lack. Everything is a fulfillment of source and of being. So there is no lack. There only is the illusion of lack. And so because we create things, whatever we create as humans, existing from a place of lack here in this physical world, what we create is going to still offer up a form of lack in some way, versus whenever God is offering something up or God is creating something, there is never lack. There is only the illusion of lack used for whatever reasons, but there is never lack, because it's coming from a place of wholeness, of completeness. A need implies lack by definition, and it involves the recognition, consciousness, or unconsciousness, and at times, fortunately, superconscious, that you would be better off in a state which is somehow different from the one you are in. Until the separation, which is a better term than the fall, nothing was lacking. This meant that you had no needs at all. If you had not deprived yourself, you would never have experienced them. There's a concept in law of attraction and LOA study. When you are trying to manifest, or you're trying to essentially produce something in this world using energy instead of just trying to create something physically, when you're trying to manifest or bring something into being, it is important that if you are praying for something to fix an issue, you're still acknowledging the issue. And whatever we acknowledge, whatever we embrace as reality, the universe takes its cue from us and it begins to produce that reality. Now, there are established realities here in this physical matrix that will never change no matter what we do, because this essentially exists for a reason. So we can't break the matrix, the physical matrix. It's always going to exist. But we exist within sub-matrices of sub-matrices. So we basically live within a universe unto ourselves within this physical construct, within this physical world. So when you are, for example, let's say you want to pray for something and you're asking God, fix this for me, or I'm praying to God to do this, it is coming from a place of lack. God, I don't have this. I want this. I need this. Fulfill this. But the problem with that is that you're still acknowledging lack. You're still acknowledging the issue. You're still acknowledging the problem as if it is unchangeable. Just by asking in this way that it exists and it's solid, you're affirming that issue. Instead of praying for something to fix this, pray for the opportunity to have what you need to work through the issue that you're struggling with. Because at that point, resources come to you to support you, to help you, and give you a bouncing off point to be able to work through whatever issues you're dealing with. God's not going to fix your problems for you. God's not here to fix our problems or our issues for us. God is the witness, not the fixer. So we can't ask God to do something we ourselves are not willing to do or take responsibility for. It's just not going to happen. So praying in that way is a waste of time, because you're basically saying, I don't want this problem. I don't want to be responsible for this. Maybe I brought it about. Maybe I contributed to it, but I don't want to deal with it. Can you fix this for me? Can you fix this for me? And it's like, what? You're here. You're responsible for your life. You have things that you need to be accountable to. And if what you are asking of the universe or God is to change this because you are the one that caused it or brought it about, then you're basically asking for a bailout. And God's job is not to bail us out from the issues and challenges that we have here. Not only that, but there are reasons why we go through these challenges, because our souls require and need us to have some of these experiences that are invaluable in the grander scheme of things. After the separation, needs became the most powerful source of motivation for human action. This is so interesting after the separation. So this is the first time I'm seeing this in a book, because when I've talked to Aja has actually given me an understanding of how everything started. And what Aja has said is that in the beginning, all things existed and there was a need for nothing. There was a lack of nothing. All things existed. All things were in the beginning, as they have always been. They have always existed. And then as source, we said to ourselves, is there all this? Is there all there is, or is there more? Is this the fullness of our awareness of ourselves? Can we understand ourselves? Can we experience ourselves in other ways beyond this? Because we are what we are, but is there more? Can we experience more? And so there was a desire within consciousness to exist in infinite forms and in infinite ways. This was what we would consider the Big Bang. It was the expansion and expression of the universe in that moment of asking, what can we experience, or is there more? And so what ended up happening is, instead of creating more, because all things existed, all things were, we actually broke ourselves up as source. We broke ourselves up into pieces. And each piece was basically given the idea that we were separate beings, even though we're all the same being. We're all one consciousness. But we were given this idea, or we were implanted with this idea that we're separate. And so as these separate mini-gods, or these separate forms of source, we still combined, there's still a combined consciousness with all of us. But what we experience individually is unique unto our own soul. So each one of our souls is like a piece of a puzzle, and the big puzzle is God, or source. So my soul, Aja, is a fragment, a figment of the source. And so I am an expression of my soul. I am an expression of that being, but which is also an expression of source. So it kind of like runs down the chain. So we essentially gave ourselves a lie to exist by. And the lie was that we were separate, and that and that there's lack. And we use that lie here in this physical world because it allows us to have a unique experience and our unique perspective. So this is the first time I'm seeing this in a book, because I've never seen this in any book yet. And so this is the first time I'm seeing it in a book after the separation, because that's what it was called. It was called the separation. We separated ourselves from each other in a lie that we were separate, so that we could go and go forward and expand in multiple ways, or experience creation in multiple ways through the expansion of it. So after the separation, needs became the most powerful source of motivation for human action. And it would be because the moment that we are as we are operating as separate beings under this illusion, then automatically there is the introduction of lack, because we aren't everything. We are limited beings. And so the introduction of lack is a part of that process. So all behavior is essentially motivated by needs, but behavior itself is not a divine attribute. The body is the mechanism for behavior. Nobody would bother even to get up and go from one place to another if he did not think he would somehow be better off. Believing that you could be better off is the reason why you have the mechanism for behavior at your disposal. That is why the Bible says, "By their deeds ye shall know them." You act according to the particular hierarchy of needs you establish for yourself. Your hierarchy, in turn, depends on your perception of what you are, that is, what you lack. This establishes your own rules for what you need to know. Separation from God is the only lack you really need to correct. But your separation would never have occurred if you had not distorted your perception of truth, and thus perceived yourself as lacking. The concept of any sort of need hierarchy arose because, having made this fundamental error, you had already fragmented yourselves into levels with different needs. As you integrate, you become one, and your one need becomes one accordingly. Only the fragmented can be confused about this. So in other words, as we split ourselves into pieces, it's not just like there was one level of these like pieces. We have different layers or levels of the different pieces that come together and produce source. So as beings, as separate beings, we are desiring for that connection. We're desiring for that awe and completion of source as ourselves again in complete form. We're desiring of this because we're like, yeah, I've got these great experiences. I'm able to go through life and have all of these interesting encounters and understand things. But there will always be this need to be complete again within ourselves as source. But it is an illusion that we are not complete to begin with. You have to remember that the separation is not a real separation. It is the illusion that there is separation. So as we move forward, our needs change. What we desire changes. How we evolve changes. But we are all desiring to return back to that feeling of completeness. So everything that we gain through our experiences, our lifetimes, all of the knowledge and awareness, the different levels of conscious awareness that we can have here, help us to reclaim the reality that we are source, and we feel more of that connection, more of that completeness. But not everybody is on the same journey. Not everybody's on the same path. And some of us need in very different ways. Some people, their needs are very basic and elemental that have to do with survival. Some people, their needs have more to do with the desire for love or for acknowledgement. And that could take people in different directions. Some people who have a desire for attention, for not attention, but for acknowledgement and for being seen, being witnessed. Some people like that can become very power hungry or can become obsessed with being popular or being famous or etc. And that's because it's based on a need. Some of us who we're desiring to control things, because in our controlling of things, we feel more of a connection because of all the things we control. That is essentially the same need, except it's dealt with or managed by the person in a different way. And so we all have different needs, and there's different levels of needs. And I think this is what they're talking about here. But as long as you do so, you must introduce correction from the bottom up. This is because you now operate in space where up and down are meaningful terms. Ultimately, of course, space is as meaningless as time. The concept is really one of space-time belief. The physical world exists only because you can use it to correct your unbelief, which placed you in it originally. As long as you knew you did not need anything, the whole device was unnecessary. So as long as we continue to desire for that connection, assuming or acknowledging that there is a separation, we will always continue to perpetuate the cycle of reincarnation. We'll always continue to move in cycle pattern, trying to get more and to get more and to get more and to get more. But when a person awakens at their fundamental core, they know the connection to all things, and there isn't hatred for people. There isn't, anger and rage. They're still human, so they may experience that here and there, but the levels of love overwhelm and surpass the awareness of separation. So people who are actually enlightened or who have awoken, because there's a lot of people going around saying that they're woke or that they are awakened or that they're, they've woken up, etc. You see people using these terms, but nobody's actually explaining what that is. And what that is the idea of being aware that we are all source, that we are actually all the same being. We're just different aspects and different perspectives of it, but it's all the same. And I don't need to push you away. You don't need to push me away, because we're all basically the same being, and we are all interconnected with each other. And if I do something against you, then I'm doing it against myself. I'm doing it against all of ourselves, because we are all the same being. So it gets very come from a place of love. It isn't always easy for people who come from a place of lack to go against pure love. It's just it's almost. It's kind of like this. It's almost like there's a man in a bar. I'm gonna make up a story, right? There's a man in a bar. He sees an individual walk in, and the individual walks in and looks at everyone and greets them with a gesture of love that is just seen in their smile. And the individual at the bar sees this person and is like, why are they smiling at me? Like, who are they? Like, what do they want? Who do they think they are? And so it's almost like, you don't have the right to share or to come into my close space. And by smiling, it allows for a subtle experience of love and of connection. And so this individual feels threatened, or they feel like someone's invading their territory, their space. They're affecting them in a way that they don't feel like they're in control of. And so they go up to this individual and they tell them, what's your problem, dude? Like, what's wrong with you? What's your problem? Whatever. Trying to intimidate, trying to like push this person into submission or into like a state of lack, so that this individual, this bully or this guy who's in fear he's coming from a place of lack. He's not willing to allow himself to be vulnerable like that. He's not willing to let anybody in. And the individual who has been walking in looks at him and says, I am you. I am you. I am here to remind you of who you are, and I am you. And so the guy's like, what are you talking about? Why are you, what's wrong with you? You're crazy, this and that or whatever. And so this guy at the bar is like, trying to essentially make this person look crazy or feel crazy, as if they don't, there's some crazy person or nut job that's walked into this bar, and that they, what they are speaking of has no basis in reality. And this other guy is like, I am you. I am you. And I love you. And I am. This guy at the bar is like, I'm gonna punch this asshole out. Like, who does he think he's talking to me like that? And like, he's like getting too closer, etc. But nothing happens. They go off in their own separate corners. And the other guy walks out the door. He's gone, never to be seen from again. The guy at the bar, he's like, this is so weird, So at first, he's like thinking about all these things, and he's always like, maybe this is a guy who was gay and he was trying to come on to me, or maybe this was a guy who was. And so he's trying to figure this out in his head, because it's just such an odd experience to have someone just love without anything required of it. It's just they were giving of their love. They were giving of it with their smile. They were giving of it with their presence. So this guy just goes through the process of figuring it out, and then he goes home. He's up all night thinking about it, trying to figure it out, etc. He just doesn't understand it, but he's just trying to figure it out. Like, why can this person have this much love without actually, he doesn't get where this is coming from. And so ultimately, this guy at the bar, he has to go through this whole reinvention process. He has to figure out who he is in the scheme of things. Is he going to be someone who goes against the opportunity to receive love, even if it's love unsolicited, or is he going to stand strong to who he knows himself to be and continue to perpetuate this kind of ignorant, very backhanded way of pushing away opportunities to receive acceptance and love that don't require anything? So he's going to make a choice. He's going to either choose to go ahead and just, continue to sustain the status quo, which is probably going to bring him more of the same, or there may be something that was awokened within him that reminded him of the fact that sometimes love does not require work, because love is free to all of us. It exists within all of us. Therefore, it is easy to share it once you connect with it within yourself. So it starts with loving yourself and connecting with the love within you and then sharing it. And so he has to decide if he's going to be this person he's always been, or if he's going to be, this other person who is going to open themselves up to the experience of love. But the short moment where he did have that experience with that person caused him to become aware of something that for many years he had kind of put down, or he just lost touch with. And so those are the little things in life that are always around us. There are reminders of who we are at our core, that we are source. There are reminders all around. It can be a stranger walking into a bar. It can be someone you see with their child. It can be, an animal that comes into our lives that has unlimited love potential. There's always these little things that tend to come up to remind us of who we are. We forget here because we're so attached to the lack, and we cannot even fathom a reality where it isn't, top dog gets the best or whatever, or we're not in competition for something. We can't imagine that because we're so glued to the reality of this space that we are in, which is a lack of love. Every aspect of fear proceeds from upside down perception. The truly creative devote their efforts to correcting this. The neurotic devotes his to compromise. The psychotic tries to escape by establishing the truth of his own errors. It is most difficult to free him by ordinary means only because he is more stable in his denial of truth. People who are just so attached to a fear-based reality are going to do everything and anything to protect and to support that reality. And there's a difference between fear within an experience and fear-based life. Fear-based life means that everything you pretty much do comes from a place of lack and is supporting some sort of reality agenda. Having fear within a moment of an experience may just be something temporary that you have in that moment because there's an opportunity to learn something through experiencing that fear. That doesn't mean that you have to stay attached or sustain that fear because it may not only serve you beyond that moment. But some of us get so attached to it, so glued to the experience of fear as being part of our norm that we live our lives from a place of fear and we worry ourselves to death. We make ourselves sick. We make ourselves anxious because we are always coming from a place of fear. But it is not a life that is very enjoyable to live, and it also robs you of an opportunity to get the most out of your time here because you are only here for a short period of time on the grander scheme of things. Okay. Number 49, the miracle makes no distinction among degrees of misperception. It is a device for perception correction which is effective quite apart from either the degree or the direction of the error. This is its true indiscriminateness. So let me read that again because I want to grasp that fully. The miracle makes no distinction among degrees of misperception. And for y'all who haven't followed along, when I talk about miracles, when I read miracles, I always think of that as alignment and also alignment and intention. So intention, alignment, that's all kind of interchangeable, but it's basically like the manifestation of the creation of something through alignment and through that intention. So the miracle makes no distinction among degrees of misperception, meaning that it doesn't matter what we think or what we believe, whenever we are aligning with these moments of something coming into our lives that we really have created or produced from the depths of ourselves through our daily thinking and our daily emotions, etc., there is no difference between, who's deserving of it and who isn't deserving of it. It's all just going to happen however it's going to happen. In other words, think of the genie in the bottle. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Once the genie's out, the genie's out. Every time you have a thought, every time you have an emotion, every time you react to something you've seen, there's an energy wave that's sent out that represents that energy, that intention. And so that's going to go out, and then what you get back is a reflection of that from this reality matrix. And it doesn't matter whether you intended to create that, to put that out there, or you didn't intend for that. Doesn't matter because your reflection is going to be whatever you are basically praying for in that moment through your energy. So that's what that's about. Christ-controlled miracles are selective only in that they are directed toward those who can use them for themselves. Since this makes it inevitable that they will extend them to others, a very strong chain of atonement is wielded. But Christ's control takes no account at all of the magnitude of the miracle itself, because the concept of size exists only in a plane that is itself unreal. Since the miracle aims at restoring reality, it would hardly be useful if it were bound by the laws of the same error it aimed to correct. Only human beings make that kind of error. It is an expression of the foolish consistency their own false beliefs have engendered. Both the power and the strength of your creative will must be understood before the real meaning of denial can be appreciated and abolished. Denial is not mere negation, it is a positive miscreation. While the miscreation is necessarily believed in by its own maker, it does not exist at all at the level of true creation. In other words, so there's a couple of things in these statements here. When they talk about Christ-controlled miracles, we as divine beings, all of us divine beings, have the opportunity and the ability to create as God, because this is what we are. We are God in physical form. We are God in experiential form. So we have the ability to create through pure intention and pure will. This is the Christ-controlled creation, or Christ-controlled thing. So we all have that Christ consciousness within us. So when we are trying to produce, let's say, something that is a miracle, which would be alignment, intention and alignment, manifestation, many times we can create for ourselves, but once we begin to realize that we have this power, this ability, we desire to create for others as well. And that's where it gets tricky, because the miracle itself is not designed for everybody. It's designed for each of us individually when we bring it into being, when something happens. So what we are producing is something for ourselves, and it is meant for us individually. But when we try to produce for others, that immediately you're going to hit a wall, because the will of others must align with that manifestation. We have people on the planet who they are able to achieve great things for a lot of people. And if you ask all the people who support those individuals, they are all lined up. Energetically, they're on the same page. However, the challenge is that they have to be on the same page. If there begins to be all of this conflict in intent and being, then it immediately the power is lost in the manifestation, and whatever is desired to be manifested is not manifested. You can't create the miracle. And so that's where it's really important to be on the same page. If people are going to like pray for something together, they all have to be in alignment on the same page. If they're not, there's too many disruptions. There's not going to be enough of the same vibratory state or energy to produce that for everyone. Now, people may produce it for themselves individually, but not necessarily produce the miracle for everybody else, because it has to be an individual choice by every single person. Number 50, true miracle compares what you make with the higher level of creation, accepting what is in accord as true and rejecting the discordant as false. All aspects of fear are untrue because they do not exist at the higher creation level. Therefore do not exist at all. To whatever extent you are willing to submit your beliefs to the real test of validity, to that extent are your perceptions healed or corrected. In sorting out the false from the true, the miracle proceeds along these lines. Perfect love casts out fear. If fear exists, then there is not perfect love. But only perfect love really exists. Therefore, if there is fear, it produces a state which does not exist. What we are being told here is that perfect love exists and is the core root within all things, or is all things. And so perfect love exists. When people fall in love into a relationship, but they're trying to force it or change it or make it do what they need it to do, because they're coming from a place of lack and fear, that if they don't have that, if they don't have it this way, then everything is ruined. Like that's a fear-based mindset. So it isn't perfect love at that point, because perfect love produces no fear. So if you are in a relationship that you feel is true love, there should be no fear regarding the loving part of that. If fear exists within the love, then it is not perfect love. It is something different. So it may not actually be love at all. At the same time, we do produce the states of imperfect love, because we individually may have only evolved enough to be able to just achieve that or to produce that in our current state. But we have the potential to produce perfect love. We have the potential to connect and to experience perfect love, because it is the core root of all of our beingness. Believe this and you will be free. Only God can establish the solution, for this faith is his gift. But you must contribute to your readiness here as elsewhere, the readiness for faith, as for everything else that is true. entails the two steps necessary for the release from fear. Denial of fear in human terms is a strong defense because it entails two levels of error. The truth can be denied, and that absence of truth can be effective. So what is being expressed here, or what they're talking about here? Believe this and you will be free. Which I believe. I believe that fear, that love is all that there is. And it's hard to tap into that part of yourself, to tap into that level of being where you just only experience love. But in order for you to experience that, you have to bring up love within yourself. You can't go out looking for something you're not able to produce for yourself. You just can't do that. So that energy of pure love, you have to produce it within yourself. If you're not capable of producing it within yourself, then you'll never receive it, because you don't even know what that looks like. You don't even know what that tastes like. You don't even know what that feels like. You have to already know it to have it. And many people go looking for love, or go looking for this idea of love, and they don't find it. And they don't find it because they never knew what they were looking for to begin with. And also, sometimes people find themselves using different ideas of love, different versions of love, to control, to manipulate, to dominate, etc. So it supports their state of lack and not their actual state of love. Okay. Recognizing fear corrects only the second error. Miracle-mindedness corrects the first. Some are more miracle-minded and less able to recognize fear, while others are less miracle-minded but better able to recognize fear. However, these differences do not affect the power of the miracle at all, since only the distinction between truth and error is its correction. Further, when these different types join together, the conditions needed for consistent miracle-mindedness, the state in which fear has been abolished, can be particularly well worked out. The purpose of this course is integration. You cannot use it right until you have taken it. As long as your identification either vacillates or is weak, you cannot accept the gifts that belong to you. You are still either vacillating between recognizing the gift and throwing it away, or regarding yourself as too weak to accept it. You do not yet know its healing power. After you have taken the course, you will accept it and keep it and use it. That is the final exam, which you will have no trouble in passing. Midterm marks are not entered in the permanent record. All that's saying is that, everything that is in the book, everything that's been channeled, everything that they're trying to teach us, either Jesus through her or her channeled knowledge through this being, all of this is going to be very, very direct for each and every one of us, because it's not something you can just read. You have to live it. And unless you live it, you don't understand it. You can't have that wisdom, which is what I've been saying, when it comes to having authentic spiritual teachers and people who really know their stuff. They're going to have a lot of experiences to pull from that have helped them to understand certain ideas, certain concepts, certain spiritual truths. Without those experiences, you can only just regurgitate. You can only just share, but there isn't an understanding of things that they have. And so there's an obvious indicator when you can tell whether someone's an actual spiritual teacher or whether someone's just regurgitating something they already read. Chapter 2. Oh my God, we finally got to chapter 2. So I'm going to read a little bit of this, and then so forth. So okay, so the real meaning, so what is it? Chapter 2, right defense and release from fear. The real meaning of possession. Now, first of all, people are going to automatically assume that when this says possession, it's talking about demons or whatever. If you're only seeing that or thinking that, you automatically are coming from a level of lack or fear that is very basic, that is basically become a part of your life. It's become a part of your reality. In other words, the world you live in, you specifically that you live in, the place you're coming from in your mind, the loving energy being of your soul, what you are choosing is to not only have to sustain a place of fear and of lack, but also that is the highest level, or that is the only possible explanation for what that could mean. you have to take it above that. You cannot operate from it. If you are too afraid of pursuing true spiritual wisdom and knowledge through all of the texts that have been put forward by all of these masters, then you experience life from a place of fear, a place of lack. And that's something that actually was taught to us through our upbringing. I was taught a place of fear and lack from the Catholic Church because that's my background. That's what I came from. So that's the first thing that's reacted within us. But just because you are reading the words, the real meaning of possession, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a devil or there's a demon or word. That's what we're going to talk about. What it means is the idea of being consumed within or from a form of beingness. That's what that means. So that's automatically what I think of when I think of that. But many people, especially people who are old school Catholic, immediately will think of like, oh my God, possession, the devil, etc. The real meaning of possession should be clarified. Fear of possession is a perverted expression of the fear of the irresistible attraction of God. The truth is still that the attraction of God is irresistible at all levels, and the acceptance of this totally unavoidable truth is only a matter of time. But you should consider whether you want to wait, because you can return now if you choose. Possession is a concept which has been subject to numerous distortions, some of which we will list below. Type 1 possession can be associated with the body only. If this occurs, sex is particularly likely to be contaminated. Possession versus being possessed is apt to be seen as the male versus the female role, since neither will be conceived of as satisfying alone, and both will be associated with fear. This interpretation is particularly vulnerable to psychosexual confusion. So when we are type 1, like possessed, and we all experience different levels of different forms of possession, of energy, of mindness, of beingness. Type 1 possession, and what is being shared here, is the idea that we overly identify with the body and the pleasure centers of the body and the pain of the body. So it's basically the body controls our choices, and we use our body to dictate what we're going to do in this world. So that's like a type 1 possession. It's being consumed by the physical mechanism of the body, which is ultimately a state of lack and a state of disconnect that is supporting the idea or the delusion that we are separate. Type 2, from a rather similar reference point, possession can also be associated with things. This is essentially a shift from type 1 and is usually due to an underlying fear of associating possession with people. In this sense, it is an attempt to protect people from one's possessiveness, like the superstition about protecting the name we mentioned before. And so, in other words, people who are possessed, type 2 possessed, are possessed by the things that they have, the power, the control, the sense of being that's a thing as well. So it's either things as physical stuff, riches, etc., wealth, prosperity, the idea of prosperity, or the control or the power or the position that they have. So that's a type 2 possession. We are being dictated or being consumed in beingness by the things that we possess, but they actually possess us, because what we do is in supporting these things or maintaining the status quo. Both type 1 and type 2 are likely to become compulsive for several reasons, including they represent an attempt to escape from the real possession drive, which cannot be satisfied this way. They set up substitute goals, which are usually reasonably easy to attain. They appear to be relatively harmless and thus seem to allay fear. The fact that they usually interfere with good interpersonal relationships can be interpreted in this culture as a lack of sophistication on the part of the other, not the self, and this induces a false feeling of confidence in the solution. It is also fairly easy to find a partner who shares the illusion. Thus, we have any number of relationships which are actually established on the basis of type 1, and others which hold together primarily because of a joint interest in type 2. The manifestly external emphasis, which both entail, seems to be a safety device and thus permits a false escape from much more basic inhibitions. As a compromise solution, the illusion of interpersonal relating is preserved, along with the retention of lack of love. This kind of psychic juggling leaves the juggler with a feeling of emptiness, which in fact is perfectly justified because he is acting from scarcity. He then becomes more and more driven in this behavior to fill the emptiness. Think of it this way, because in my life have definitely dealt with the desire or the feelings of lack and the idea of consumerism. And consumerism is a perfect example of this. We get into these habits where we buy and buy and buy and buy and buy and buy stuff. And it's almost like, we never stop buying stuff. We never stop consuming stuff, because in the desire for things, and the desire to buy this bag, to buy this outfit, to buy these shoes, and the desire to buy these things or to have these things, immediately we are acknowledging that we are in a state of lack, and we do not have that which we desire, which is a sense of completeness and love. And so instead of trying to go about it in a way where we go within and bring up the feelings of completeness and the feelings of love within ourselves to help us to feel it, we tend to go out and buy things. We tend to go out, consume things, whether it's food, whether it's stuff that's on sale, whether it's people or relationships. We consume because we're trying to use it to fill a void within us. But the void isn't something's missing or I'm broken. The void is I am acknowledging the illusion that I am separate from myself as God or as source. I am acknowledging that I am in a state of lack and I do not have. Therefore, I am doing this action or going in this direction or having this intent to fill the sense of lack within me, but the lack within me is not filled by something else that also represents a state of lack, because it's produced and it was created in a state, from a state of lack in this physical matrix. So instead of going outward to fill ourselves up, we have to go within and bring up the sense of completeness and the sense of love within us. We cannot ask for that which we are not able to produce ourselves. We just can't do it, because in order for us to receive something, we have to sustain it within ourselves so that it sticks and it becomes a real thing for us. When these solutions have been invested with extreme belief, type 1 leads to sex crimes and type 2 to stealing. The kleptomaniac is a good example of the latter. Generally, 3 types of emotional disturbance result. The tendency to maintain the illusion that only the physical is real. This produces depression. So if you exist in a mindset where this is all there is, and we actually don't exist beyond this physical state, and we only see this physical state with all that it entails, both the positive and negative, we tend to become depressed because we don't see any way of experiencing outside of that. So it basically feels like a prison. This physical world feels like a prison. And so that's what that's talking about. The tendency to invest the physical with non-physical properties. This is essentially magic and tends more toward anxiety proneness. In other words, I've spoken about this before, where I don't really care to use tools in any of my spiritual work, because for me, tools don't really help me become more spiritual. They only provide a condition or a mechanism that only allows for the experience of like one part of myself. So I don't really believe in using tools to get the most out of your intuition or to develop your skills fully. You can use tools, you can use tarot cards, you can use pendulums, you can use whatever you want to use. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to get the most benefit from using these tools. They can help you develop yourself, but there's limitations to these tools because they're still physical things. And as long as we depend on physical things to allow us to have the connection within ourselves, with ourselves in grander form, we limit our connection because we are using a physical thing which is produced from a state of lack to try to amplify the sense of not being disconnected, the sense of not being in lack, the sense of not being in fear. And it's almost like, it goes against each other. So that's what they're talking about here. So people who, for example, and what this is saying is individuals who they become obsessed with magic or with using things to produce a creation or to manifest something, to bring about some sort of manifestation. They're limiting their ability to produce because they are essentially acknowledging from a place of lack, using the tools that represent the lack, which is this world, to create something that is not supposed to represent lack. So there's almost like the butting of heads there. It's not going to work as well. The tendency to vacillate from one to the other, which produces a corresponding vacillation between depression and anxiety. So we're going to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth within our different levels of possession, which is what they're referring to right here. Because there's different levels of possession, which we're talking about the possession of the physical world. And so when we are overly identifying with our bodies are the ability, our body is our tool that helps us to feel better or helps us to feel worse. So we basically are living from that limited point of view and perspective. So we cut ourselves off from source. So that's one form. And then there's the consumerism, the desire for more and more and more. That's another form of possession. And sometimes we go back and forth, and we'll start to vacillate. We'll start to go back and forth because we are trying to produce something for ourselves using a state of lack and things within that are produced out of a state of lack to give us a state of beingness, wholeness, of connection, completeness. And those just don't match up. They don't work together well. So let's see where we at here. I'm gonna stop there because we've got a lot more to read here. So so that's pretty much what that is saying. So it's interesting because it's the idea that we come here, we're in this physical world, we're here to have a unique experience, which I've said over and over and over again. But we want heaven here. We want to have the experience of heaven here permanently. Then why are we here? Why did we choose to come into this physical world? Why didn't we just continue to sustain ourselves in spirit form as beings in that heavenly state? Why did we come here? Because we didn't come here to have a perfect life. We came here to have experiences through perspective. Yes, that means that we're going to go through periods of lack and that we're going to go through periods where we don't always feel 100% connected and feel that sense of loving beingness 100% of the time. We're going to have experiences that bring us to the brink of despair, that bring us to the brink of depression, that bring us to the brink of suffering and pain. But that doesn't mean we have to stay in that state for the duration of our time here, because we can have those experiences and then we can go right back into a state that is much more tolerable for us, for those of us who are very awakened and know just how this is not reality. This is not where we're from, and this is not what it really is all about. We're just here for whatever we got to get done. So it's an interesting approach to, instead of rejecting the suffering that you go through in life, rejecting the pain you may encounter, rejecting the realities of this world that will remain that way because it's set up that way. It's interesting that we don't have to feel overly attached to that reality. We don't have to feel overly connected to this physical world. We're here. It's what Jesus said. I'm of this world, but I'm from this world, but not of it. It's like you can be from this world, but not of it. We don't have to exist based out of this state. We can use the state, use it as the tool it was designed to be, and then go ahead and move forward once we're done. But we need to remember who we are. And the only way we can do that is by reminding ourselves that we are source, that we are God. The only way that we remind ourselves is either by expressing love as often as possible from the purest way without any payback, or to bring up the feeling of love within yourself based on the times you've had encounters with it and amplifying that effect not only within you, but then sending it out as well. That can help us to reconnect to a state of beingness that allows us to feel Source, God, and everything that we've created in this in existence. So that can help us, and that's the way to survive this state, to get through the state without feeling completely overwhelmed or without feeling as if it's unbearable. Because once we understand that, then we're like, oh, okay, I'm here for whatever amount of time. I clocked in. I got this stuff to do. Let me do the best that I can. But I'm not going to. It's like, if I got to get dirty, that's fine. But I'm not going to go swimming in the mud every day. So if you got to get dirty to do something, that's fine. Do what you got to do. Experience what you have to experience. But then after you're done, come to bring yourself back to a place of beingness that will help you to survive being here, because life is not an easy thing. And this is the way to get through it and still honoring yourself and the reasons that you decided to come here. Because as physical beings in this human body, we don't always remember every reason why we chose to limit ourselves into this physical form. We are, assuming that we had a good reason. But we don't have the full understanding because we're out of sync with the rest of the information that we have on a soul level. So, all right, guys, I love you all. Thanks for tuning in. I want to see if y'all have any questions before I let y'all go about the material. Matt John's physic, can't even spell psychic right. That's a troll, y'all. He's going to take y'all's money, so be careful. Because he's going to steal y'all blind. I'm highly intuitive, really. So those are personal questions. Let me go over here. Let me see. If there are any questions regarding the material before I get off here. All right, guys. Yeah, that's it. So, FYI, guys, curses. Stop empowering your belief, because your belief is the curse. There is a spiritual law that prevents you from being controlled or manipulated or affected by someone else's will unless you agree to it with your will. So if you are experiencing a whole bunch of crap, you've probably accepted it through your thoughts, emotions, and memories unintentionally through your state of mind. So you probably need to work on that. And there's a few things you can do. You can go and watch the film The Secret, because it'll help you understand energy. But you need to line up with higher vibratory states, higher beingness, a place of love, a place of higher mindset. Watching The Secret can help you, but doing spiritual work helps you as well. But you have to connect with that part of yourself. The idea of someone cursing you and doing something to you, there's a spiritual law against that, and that's not going to be how that works. Okay, all right, guys, I love you all, and I will see you next. I will see you next week. Actually, I'll see you. See you Friday.